Okay, good morning, everyone. So if you can hear me clearly, can you type yes in the chat box? Just want to make sure with some technical checkup before we start. So I can see some wonderful faces here. So if you can hear me loud and clear, can you please type in the chat box? Okay, so I can see you guys already here. So really appreciate these first responses are very highly appreciated. Okay, and then I can also see our keynote speakers here. Morning, Adam. Good to see you.
Morning.
Okay, and morning, Gabriel. Good to see you.
Good morning.
Okay, so so I think that very clearly, right? Okay, so really appreciate your response. So good morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the live webinar Approaches for Teaching IELTS Preparation Courses Opportunity Challenges. We can say best practice and strategies for teaching the IELTS test are very popular and common topic. I'm Huy Pham, the Academic Manager of Horizon TESOL, and Adam, Gabriel, and Mr. Nghia Vu will be joining here today with me for a very engaging presentation. And I hope that the contents that we bring to you today will be useful for your teaching career. So this participant-driven workshop is hosted by Ho Chi Minh City TESOL Association, Horizon TESOL, with the keynote speakers from many universities and also English centers who comes and share with us their teaching expertise and also experience. So I would like to thank you for everyone for joining with us today on this special occasion and being ready for the wonderful presentation from our keynote speakers. So now I would like to introduce our keynote speakers first. Let's give a big hand of applause for Mr. Grabiel Ryan. He's an academic English lecturer, an IELTS trainer, and the International School of Business, ISB.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here.
Morning.
Mr. Nghia Vu, the academic officers from WESET English Center, and also the IELTS High Score Achiever.
With you today. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Nghia. And Mr. Adam Briffet, the TESOL trainer at Horizon TESOL, and also the directors of education at Manager of Education. May know me before, and in case this is the first time we met. My name is Huy Pham, the academic managers of Horizon TESOL, and I will be the moderators and also the host of today's event. Our workshop is so glad to welcome many valued TESOL course participants and also participants of the TESOL community in Ho Chi Minh City and other regions of Vietnam to come here. And now let me introduce a little bit about our agenda today. So after my opening remarks, we'll be sharing from Mr. Adam, and then we will come to the two presentations delivered by Mr. Grabiel Ryan and then Mr. Nghia Vu. Mr. Grabiel Ryan will be sharing some of the fundamentals of academic English and the roles of academic English in teaching IELTS. And then Mr. Nghia Vu will focus more on some specific area and aspect of teaching IELTS for different levels. And after the workshop, of course, I hope that we will have a very engaging and dynamic questions and answer sections. So I know that IELTS training, IELTS teaching is something really emerging and a very interesting topic in Vietnam. So after that, feel free, right, to stay with us because we're going to have the TESOL ceremony graduation. For all of the TESOL participants who had just completed the courses at Horizon TESOL. So that is basically the agenda of our events today. So I've been talking too much. I'm sorry for that. So now before we start, I would love to hear from you, the participants, more. So the topic is IELTS training. So can any one of you here share with me the reasons why you are here with us? Maybe some of your experience in teaching or maybe studying IELTS, anything you want to share with us, you can use the chat box or you can share with us via the microphone. So currently as a IELTS teachers at my university, I know that teaching IELTS is something very important, especially for a variety group of students. These days, they need to submit the IELTS certificate to for their graduations. And also they want to achieve the higher band score in IELTS in order to apply for their further study or studying abroad. So I can have some ideas here from our guests. So I want to know more about teaching method for IELTS. I'm here with a high hope to improve my method. And I'm a new IELTS teacher, so I would love to learn a lot from IELTS experts. Okay, so we would love to share with you a lot of our teaching experience. And for sure, for my future teaching career, that's great. Okay, so can anyone here share with us what are some challenges if you're already in IELTS training teachers? What are some challenges that you normally encounter during your teaching? Okay, so here we have another comment from Mr. QAI. As a recent postgraduate, I'm in need of further experience, and there are experts here, so why not? Wow. Okay, give it a try, right? Okay. Okay, so let's come to the next questions that I already asked, and I would hope to have your ideas. Okay, so I don't have to teach students at different levels. So Mr. Nghia Vu, I think you will help our participant a lot in this section, right? Okay. Okay, I'm here to learn how to teach English more effectively. And of course, teaching test preparation course is also a very good experience for you to practice teaching English in general too. Okay, so I think I would like to know more about teaching method for IELTS expert. So leave your questions here, and maybe more questions in the future right after the delivery from our presenters. Okay, so now I won't occupy you much more time. Okay, I would also want to have a second job. Wow, okay. Okay, so I think that it's time that Adam, can you provide some insights for our TESOL participants about teaching IELTS in the bigger scale, in the global scale. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Adam Briffet.
So it's a great pleasure to be here with you all today and having this opportunity to discuss IELTS in the modern era, especially in the online context, which we find ourselves in post-COVID-19. So I'm going to talk a little bit about current market trends on a global sort of macro picture, and I'm going to talk a little bit about opportunities in the future for online education and for educators in the market as we move forward. I'll also give some remarks and some introduction to our two speakers today. So some of you may know me, many of you may know me from the TESOL Module 3 course at Horizon, but some of you do not know me. So to introduce myself, my name is Adam, and I am the Director of Education and Business Development at Major Oak Education. I have over 10 years of experience in international education, working in various roles, but I do have a specific experience managing IELTS programs. So I do hope that I have something useful to share with you today. So to give a bit of an overview of what I'm going to be talking about, following the COVID-19 pandemic, as we all know, CALL, which is the acronym for Computer Assisted Language Learning, has become a major feature of education, both in Vietnam and also around the world. So we're going to be talking a little bit about how online education is transforming the education landscape. We'll discuss some key trends in technology-assisted education, as well as some emerging trends in the IELTS market. And we'll be looking at some key data to understand what is happening in the market. So, understanding the market, that is our main mission for this short presentation. Why should students study IELTS and why should teachers teach the IELTS? So the first thing to note, if we're looking at the global market for education and training, is that global expenditure on education has been steadily rising over the past 2 decades, and it is projected to rise even further towards the end of the current decade. It's actually projected to top the level of 10 trillion US dollars by the time we reach 2030. And within this context, of course, English continues to be the international language. It's essentially the language of business, the language of commerce, the language of politics. English is still the indispensable mode of communication. The English language learning market is expected to grow at a compound annual growth rate of 6.2% from 2022 onwards to reach 54.9 billion by 2027. And the interesting thing about the education market, as well as other key markets such as the healthcare market, is that they tend to be resistant to recessions. So even if there was to be some form of a global recession or an economic crisis, it is expected that the education market will continue to grow. So that's the first thing I wanted to share with you, the global context of expenditure and investment in the education and training market. Now, moving on and zooming in a little bit, something that we should also be aware of is that within this context, expenditures on education technology, which is sometimes shortened to EdTech or EduTech, are projected to almost double in the next 5 years as online, blended learning and app-based learning increase in their usage. So as we can see from figure 2, EdTech spending is expected to nearly double in the next 5 years, to go from what it was in 2020 at about 227 billion US dollars to upwards of 400 billion US dollars by 2025. Now, as we know, COVID has affected things a great deal. The COVID-19 pandemic has massively increased the speed of this trend, with post-COVID compound annual growth rates of the EdTech sector standing at 16%. Okay, so that's a compound annual growth rate year on year. It was projected to be 13% pre-COVID, but the COVID pandemic has increased the speed of that compound annual growth rate. So if we look at figure 3, we can see the blue line represents the post-COVID change in investment and spending on the EdTech market. So there has been a big impact from recent events, recent global events, and this is something which is here to stay. That is one of the key points that I would like to convey during this presentation, that the switch to online and blended learning mode education programs is not a short trend. It is here to stay, and it will be a major part of online learning. Well, it is online learning, but it'll be a major part of education going forward. Okay, so within that context, we can have a look at the overall context for global English proficiency test markets. So we've talked a little bit about the global trend of increasing investment and spending on education. We've talked about the increasing investment in EdTech or EduTech. And we can also have a look at the macro context of where this spending is happening. So on the basis of geography, the Asia Pacific region is dominating the global English language learning market. It is sucking up more of the investment than any other region in the world. As we can see from the pie chart in the top right-hand corner, it is significantly larger than any of the other sectors, even larger than Europe. And the main factors that are driving this language learning market, of course, along with population, are expanding government focus towards the education sector. So governments are spending more public money on education. There is high adoption of digital technologies across the region, high education expenditure by families as well as by governments, rapidly developing economies in many parts of the world, including Vietnam, which has rapidly rising levels of FDI, which is foreign direct investment, and increasing disposable income on the part of what we might call the consumer classes or the middle classes, which is leading to the penetration of the internet and the integration of the economy with the internet across the region. So global English proficiency test markets in Asia Pacific are significantly larger than other parts of the world. That is the key point here, which makes Vietnam one of the beneficiaries of these trends. Okay, so we've talked about the global context of investment and spending. We've talked about the increasing investment in EdTech. We've talked about the significance of the Asia Pacific region. Now, to focus in a little bit more on the IELTS test, IELTS continues to hold the highest market share in the English proficiency test market. Okay, so if we're thinking about a student who wants to study abroad, or somebody who wants to get a visa, somebody who wants to work overseas, IELTS continues to be the gold standard qualification in order to achieve those goals. It's largely holding this position due to its higher acceptance rates across various institutions. As we can see in the red circle on the right, it is recognized by over 11,000 organizations worldwide. So it has massive coverage. It is also the most widely accepted EPT, that means English proficiency test, for student and tier 2 visas. So that's also a major driver of the popularity of the IELTS. Now, as a result of this continued market dominance, the IELTS will continue to be a gold standard certification in the years to come. And this is obviously happening within the context of what we've already talked about as an increasingly online-driven education market. So there will be online IELTS programs, there will be blended mode IELTS programs. This is all going to be a part of the education big picture that we are working within as education professionals. So, just to sum up some conclusions from this sort of market overview, first of all, as we've noted, the education sector will continue to grow in investment and significance. And as a result of this, career opportunities in education will also continue to grow. So if you're working in education, congratulations, you've chosen an excellent field to work in. There will be many career opportunities in the years to come. Second of all, online, blended and EdTech learning are here to stay. Okay, so they're not just a COVID-19 fad. They are here to stay, and they will be a major aspect of education and training in the future. So as a result of this, familiarity with online teaching methods will be essential for instructors and educators going forward. The third conclusion we can draw is that the Asia Pacific region, including Vietnam, continues to attract the highest growth in English language learning, investment and operations. Okay, so the Asia Pacific is really where the money is all going. This is the part of the world where the spending is taking place. So it's certainly a place where there will be career opportunities in the education sector. And fourth of all, as we conclude, IELTS remains the largest player in the English proficiency test market. And it will continue to be a gold standard certification into the future. It's not going to be replaced anytime soon. So if you have a career in education, it makes a lot of sense to be very aware of the IELTS. Now, as we are working with our various partners and working at Horizon TESOL to bring you more certifications in education and training, there are further opportunities that we are always working to bring to your availability. And right now we have a training course in teaching IELTS, which is a QAI Level 2 certificate. This is delivered fully online, which comes with foundation modules as well as 5 IELTS specific modules for teaching the methodology of essentially focused on how to teach reading, how to teach listening, how to teach speaking, and how to teach writing. So this is a certificate that we currently have available, but we are working to bring more certifications and more training courses, both online and face-to-face, to the Vietnamese market. So we would be very grateful if after this presentation, after today's webinar, you would be, if you had some time to complete a survey and let us know about what kind of training and what kind of certifications you would be interested in taking. Now, I would like to introduce to all of you the next speaker for today. That is all that I really needed to talk about in terms of the market. But I'd like to introduce our next speaker, which is a good friend of mine, a very good friend of mine, someone who I have known for nearly 10 years. And you are very, very lucky today to have the opportunity to listen to him speak, because he is one of the best teachers that I have ever met. He is Grabiel Ryan, who has a lot of experience, a huge wealth of experience in the education sector, working in South Korea and Vietnam. And he, I believe, is going to talk to you about some teaching methodologies and some of his experiences in teaching in academic English and also IELTS. So, Gabe, are you ready to go?
Yes, I am. I think I am. Thank you very much for that warm welcome. Hopefully I live up to the delivery you've given me there. Thank you very much. All right. Well, I'll just share my screen now going forward. Well, first of all, to everyone here, it is an absolute pleasure to be gathered with all of you today. Again, thank you to Adam for that very warm and generous introduction. Hopefully I can share some of my experience, and hopefully some of you find it useful that are in the audience. When I look around and I see the guests that we have in the audience right now, I can see quite a few of you are relatively young. Some of you are maybe closer to my age, which is wonderful as well. But to those of you who are young in the audience, I remember being you. I remember being in your stage of my career. I remember entering the educational market and wondering what opportunities exist and how to be prepared for those opportunities. And so today, hopefully through this speech, I'll be able to introduce some practices that I personally use for IELTS instruction, but also for academic English instruction. And more importantly, I hope I'll be able to answer some of your questions, your specific questions that you have regarding IELTS instruction. So throughout the session, if you do have questions or specifics that you want to add, please consider them, and you can add them into the chat box as well. And I know Mr. Huy has already organized that we'll have a Q&A session after, where I can address some of those IELTS specific questions. So please, the more questions, the better. I'm happy to support and help. So first and foremost, Adam gave a brief introduction of me already, but I'll talk a bit more about myself now. My favorite topic, myself. So to introduce myself, I've been teaching English in East Asia since 2011. Initially, I worked in South Korea for 7 years as an English language instructor. In 2018, I came here to Vietnam to help develop a language center program and manage as the academic coordinator of several language center campuses here in Ho Chi Minh. I also have a master's in teaching English as a second language from the University of Kansas. My background in managing the academy here in Vietnam pushed me to have to develop IELTS programs. And while I was in South Korea, I also had to develop TOEFL programs. So I have a bit of experience teaching both TOEFL and IELTS and developing programs for TOEFL and IELTS as well. Currently, I am working at the Western Sydney University and I'm teaching academic English at the university, and I also teach English for academic proficiencies. So I'll talk a little bit more about my teaching context. So here I have a photo from when I was in South Korea a long time ago. They may look very young, but the students in that audience are all taking the TOEFL examination. They're all taking a practice TOEFL test. That's as early as they start for TOEFL preparation in South Korea. In South Korea, they have a preference or a proclivity to study TOEFL more than IELTS due to a closer affiliation with North America, whereas here in Vietnam, due to the strong relationship with the British Council, it's more common to take the IELTS examination. Here in the picture on the side, you can see some of my current students at ISB who are all currently taking academic English and have left me with a large pile of assignments to grade later today. But to talk specifically about what I teach and how it relates to IELTS, I just want to go over that a little bit. So one of the things that's really good to know as a person entering the field of education right now is what opportunities exist. So what can you do within the field of education, especially regarding IELTS or regarding academic English? So as Adam has mentioned already, IELTS is definitely a gatekeeper here in Asia, right? All students need to take the IELTS examination here in Vietnam if they're in college. And generally, the score range that we're targeting is between a 5.0 to 6.5, right? But for many students who struggle to achieve those bands, there's also preparatory courses. If you're not able to get a 5.0 or a 5.5, there are many classes. I'm sure some of you have friends who've taken such classes in university. So one of the classes that I teach is English for academic purposes, which is designed specifically for students who are not able to achieve a 5.5 score on IELTS. So that's a fairly common model of instruction that you'll find. So there are two variations. One is that you'll wind up teaching IELTS, the exam itself, and examination strategies. And there are alternative programs which seek to teach the skills that IELTS develops without explicitly teaching to the IELTS examination. So if you're interested in university education, those are two great starting points that you can look into, is teaching IELTS-oriented classes or academic proficiency skills for students who are not able to achieve certain benchmarks on the IELTS exam. My other course that I currently teach is for students who have achieved a 6.5 or higher on the IELTS exam. And those students are still utilizing many of the skills that we develop from the IELTS exam, such as formatting, structuring your writing, and organizing an academic essay. Another skill that we have to teach in this course is developing presentation skills and developing an ability to express yourself in English in front of a large audience, which is a skill that's highly tested in the speaking section of the IELTS exam. So there's a lot of crossover between academic English and IELTS in general. And how much does that have an impact on university education here? Well, as Adam mentioned already, IELTS is here to stay. Online education is here to stay, and the industry is continually and rapidly growing. So currently, I want to talk a bit about English as a medium of instruction. So all four of our key speakers today work in university contexts where we deal with English as a medium for instruction, where students are studying and utilizing English in classes that may not be focused on English. And research shows that that is a field that is increasing dramatically. In fact, it's been shown that English as a medium for instruction programs have increased in Europe since 2002 to 2014 by 1,000%. So the amount of students who are studying in a collegiate setting fully in English is increasing fairly rapidly. Furthermore, research shows that English as a medium of instruction programs in secondary schools are also increasing dramatically, as we can see through the many international high schools and other programs here in Ho Chi Minh City. And furthermore, in 2016, over 1 million foreign exchange students entered the United States, which is the highest amount of foreign exchange students in the United States to date. So all of this data shows us that the field of English education, especially related to higher education, is continually expanding. So if you are entering the job market, as Adam said, good for you. This is a good time to be entering the market. And to talk a little bit more about English as a medium of instruction and IELTS, you know, when we consider IELTS, is it a practical test? Is this something that actually has benefit for students who are entering English-oriented programs or are studying academically with English? And research indicates yes, it is. So as a predictive tool for the IELTS score, the IELTS group actually recommends that students who achieve a 5.5 or a 6.0 should probably continue to study with additional English support classes as they enter university. And just as I mentioned, students who achieve a 6.5 or higher generally can study entirely without support classes geared towards IELTS or academic English. And interestingly, research tells us that students who do make increases in their IELTS score and students who do show progress in terms of their IELTS performance actually increase their performance overall in university education in English as a medium of instruction programs. So in one study in the United Arab Emirates, a study showing that students who had achieved a 6.0 upon entering and had increased their score to 6.5, or students who had achieved a 6.5 and had increased their score to 7.0, in 100% of the analysis had shown an increase in their GPA as well. So that is to say, if students can improve their IELTS performance, not only are they more likely to get a better score, they're also more likely to improve their overall performance in university. So that means IELTS instruction is not only a very expansive industry, but it's also an industry that has a direct effect on the performance of students in classes. So let's talk a little bit about what we're really here to discuss then, which is instructional practices for the IELTS exam. So I'm sure most of you in this class, or maybe all of you, have taken the IELTS exam before. And I'm sure many of you have also taught the IELTS exam. Just as a quick question before I move on, I wonder about those in the audience. If some of you could share in the chat box now, what are your targets? What are your goals in terms of what you would like to teach? I would be very curious. Are those in the audience looking to teach IELTS in a high school setting? Are there people in the audience who are looking to teach IELTS in a university setting? Are there people who are already teaching IELTS in a university setting who are looking to continually develop their skills? If some of you could share in the chat box what your goals are in terms of teaching, what would you like to do related to IELTS in the field? I'd be very interested to see that as I go through the presentation. So please go ahead and add that in. If you have a target or a goal in the field of IELTS education, please add it to our chat box here. And as you all add that, I'll continue on with the presentation. Moving on, our speech is going to focus a little bit more now on some key skills, which I think are both useful for IELTS, and many of them are useful for general English instruction as well. So the first skill I want to really focus on is preparation and the absolute importance of preparation. The second skill I want to talk about is assessments. And the last one I'll focus on are just some quick tips and tricks for IELTS instruction. So going on, when we're really thinking about IELTS classes, for many people, what they receive when they start teaching IELTS is a textbook. Of course, I use Mindset for IELTS, which is quite a good textbook, I believe. The Mindset for IELTS series is designed by Cambridge for IELTS instruction strategies. I think it's very effective. But in many cases, you'll just be presented with a test practice book. I'm sure some of you have experienced such test practice books filled with many, many copies of practice exams. So in that case, we have a very serious mission as an educator to organize our lessons and to prepare to help students to do well on those specific practice tests. So preparation, problem solving, and adaptivity become very important in terms of our preparation for those classes. So how do we prepare? What do we do to get ready? So the first thing we need to do is, if you are a foreign lecturer in particular, you need to stay informed about the structure of the exam. So beyond just the structure of the exam, whether you're teaching IELTS or whether you're teaching TOEFL, you need to know the test inside and out. You need to know what students will expect when they take the examination. Will they be required to have a break in the middle of the test? Will it be recorded on a computer? What will they need to do when they meet with a foreign instructor? What are all the time limits for each segment of the test? And how is the test scored and evaluated? All of these factors are incredibly important. And as educators, our first step is knowing that test inside and out. So to go over it for a little bit here, we can look at the band descriptors for the IELTS Task 2 writing section. Later in our speech presentation segment, Mr. Nghia will talk more in depth about the differences between the bands in sections for the IELTS and how to accurately develop lessons for different band ranges. But briefly, I'll just talk about the importance of bands. So as we discussed earlier, student bands make a big difference in not only their ability to study in university, but their ability to perform well in university in English-oriented programs. So to understand the key bands, right, for IELTS, we need to really understand what they are being assessed on. So your first step would be to really familiarize yourself with the band descriptors and what they are being graded on, because from that, we can develop strategies to help the students prepare to meet those targets. All right, and moving on, I want to talk a bit now about some strategies. So as I said, we need to know the test inside out. And those who have studied for the IELTS test know there are a lot of parallels between the English that we'll use in a university setting and the English we use on the test. However, there are specific skill sets that are incredibly valuable for the IELTS exam in particular that we should be teaching to students, regardless if our textbook introduces it or not. It's important to supplement the textbooks and make sure that our lessons provide all of the key skills that students need to perform well on the IELTS exam. So some of those skills, I would say, are first, just as a brief introduction, teaching the passive voice for writing. If you're doing the task 1 writing task, you'll need to describe a kind of mechanical process or describe the features of a chart. So in that case, the passive voice is a very useful tool for students. However, typically when students are writing in standard English persuasive essays, they tend to use the active voice. So they may need to be taught how...
Gì kỳ vậy? Chị làm cho nó
Thank you, Jenny. I'll just keep moving. So we need to teach them things such as the passive voice, which help them to perform to the standards of the exam. We also need to choose organizational patterns that students can learn. Anyone who has taken the IELTS test would know that for the essay section, the persuasive essay section, there are many structures for the essay that students would have to deal with, such as to what extent essay questions. And the strategy we would use to answer a to what extent essay question versus an agree-disagree question is somewhat different. So familiarizing yourself and familiarizing students with strategies that they can use on the writing test is definitely essential. For the reading section, some key skills we might introduce include skimming and scanning through the text, predictive reading, right? Looking ahead, looking for key ideas is very important as the students go through these very dense passages of reading in the IELTS test. For the listening passage, again, predictive listening, looking ahead at the reading materials associated with the listening passage, and teaching students to make educated guesses before the listening starts is very, very important. Of course, teaching them to listen for keywords and teaching them how to analyze charts and how to describe charts is very important as well too. So those are just some of the strategies that we might consider for IELTS instruction. But the better we understand the requirements of the test and what they're being graded for, the better we can start to prepare what skills students will need. So I'll talk about the next step, I think, which is important for all educators, but it's something that I use regardless if I'm teaching an IELTS lesson or I'm teaching a lesson at ISB, and that's building lesson plans. So generally, when you receive a class, you will be receiving certain goals that need to be accomplished within a class or certain benchmarks that need to be achieved by the end of the class. But what you may not receive, and typically you won't, is a specific lesson plan that tells you how to go through a session. And if you enter into a classroom where it is a digital setting, maybe there are 50 students online, and you have a 2-hour block or a 3-hour block to teach about speaking or writing in IELTS, suddenly it's a very complex process that we need to organize, right? So the best tip that I can recommend is building lesson plans for any lesson you have for IELTS, okay? So ask yourself, what are the key skills that you'll be introducing in the lesson? And what are the key vocabulary words that you want them to develop? Whatever your textbook teaches for that unit, you may want to consider as well when looking at the textbook. Is this learning focus developed enough in the textbook? Is there enough practice materials in the textbook for students to sufficiently be able to learn this point? And if not, in many cases, the answer will be not. You need to supplement that textbook and consider how you can help them to achieve these key focuses in your lesson. So you should always start from that point. What are the goals for the day, and how am I going to help students accomplish this? How can my textbook and additional preparation help me to meet those specific goals? And of course, you should always consider formative and summative assessments when creating your materials. So, just to introduce briefly, there are two really good lesson plan templates that you can look for. If you haven't developed lesson plans very much before, I want to recommend the SIOP lesson plan template or the SDAIE lesson plan template, which you can find quite easily online. Personally, I tend to use the SDAIE lesson plan template, which is, I'll show an example here. So you can see from the structure, it outlines many stages of the class. It gives a chance for teachers to consider what they will do and what students will do while they're preparing their lessons. And it also factors in formative assessments. When will you check for progress? When will you check for comprehension as you go through your lesson? And how will you motivate students as you sequence your lesson? So I find this a very helpful tool for me to organize my thoughts when considering a complex subject such as preparing for an IELTS-oriented class. So I recommend you take a look at those, and they're quite useful to develop lesson plans around. So just to review what I just mentioned, when we're organizing a lesson plan, the first step we want to consider are the key skills of the lesson. What are we focusing on? And research indicates that this is a pretty shocking point. Up to 30% of improvement can happen if you just clarify what the learning goals are for students at the start of the class. So if you introduce those key skills explicitly and clearly at the start of class, it has a very positive impact on student performance throughout the lesson. So you having a clear understanding of what you're seeking to accomplish with the lesson will help them to perform better in the class. So taking those skills that you cover in the class and considering what students will be expected to do, what are the action verbs that students will need to accomplish throughout the lesson, is also an important step for developing your lesson plans. And of course, we need to supplement our textbooks if necessary with additional materials to make sure that all of our lessons cover each point in depth. Especially for vocabulary. You'll find a lot of IELTS textbooks introduce vocabulary, but not a sufficient amount for students to make a major improvement in their score. So that's one area I definitely recommend, is always consider the vocabulary that you're covering in class and how you can supplement that as well. And again, consider formative and summative assessment practices with your classes. So let's talk about that for a bit. So typically when we consider an IELTS class, we're thinking about what's called a summative assessment, which is the final review, the final test to see the results of our practice, right? Maybe it's a practice IELTS examination. Maybe it's an actual IELTS examination. When I was working with English Language Center employees, this was a very high stakes point, because if students didn't achieve a certain benchmark, say a 0.5 increase, their next course would be free. So it's really important that we meet certain summative assessment goals. However, we all know that students need to take IELTS at the end of the course. However, how do we track their progress throughout the course? And one important step is consistently and frequently checking for student understanding and student progress through what's called formative assessments, which are the steps that we take as educators to track student progress as they're going through IELTS learning material. So those types of assessments can include short quizzes that we hold in class. Perhaps you can have them practice a single speaking task or a shortened version of a writing task, or several reading questions, or demonstrate proficiency using transition words or another language skill. We can test that with quizzes regularly throughout our classes. Another thing we can do is, I'll introduce a few more strategies down below. Here we are. So another thing we can consider for formative assessments in our classes are what's called exit slips. And exit slips are a small test that we give to students that they must complete, a small short paper examination that students will complete, usually one question that they must submit before leaving the class. After the class, teachers can review those slips and check for trends and data to help them make educated decisions about where students are performing well and where students need additional support to improve their performance throughout future classes. A good example of this would be, as I taught TOEFL, somewhat related to IELTS, many students struggled with the integrated writing task. And frequently, through my formative assessments, I could find those points where students were struggling, which issues were presented by the test that they still had difficulty with. And I was able to figure out that the structure of the task and the specific directions of the task were still confusing for students. So definitely using formative assessment strategies throughout your classes will help you to inform your decisions before it's too late, before we get to that final exam and we need to demonstrate progress from our students. So another step that we might consider is metacognition. So one thing that's quite interesting is that students often have a fairly inaccurate understanding of their abilities to perform in classes. So metacognition is the practice of students reflecting on their own learning and considering their own abilities and having an accurate understanding of where they are on the progress curve. And I'm sure as you listen to Mr. Nghia's speech later, we'll see that it's really important for students to understand which band range they're currently in so they can set personal goals for themselves, as each band range has very specific skills that we would want to target. So by helping students to better understand their own abilities and check their own progress, we can help them to have a realistic expectation for what they need to do and what they can accomplish through our courses. So, of course, in terms of what metacognitive skills students might have, we should have students checking their own. We should have students assessing their progress and peer progress, which can be done by peer assessments of writing examples or peer assessments of speaking tasks in the class. And of course, we can have them doing evaluative writing as well, writing written reflections about their performance in class and assessing their own performance to create new goals for themselves as learners. To go back to this here, I would say, just as a final note on assessment strategies, I think that when we're considering assessment strategies, the more frequent, the better. So formative assessment strategies can include just going to a student's desk and listening to their response to check for progress, but it can also involve exit slips and quizzes, as we mentioned. But the more data that we're able to gather and the more carefully we can track notes, the better we'll be able to alter our courses so that students can have a better learning experience. So moving on, I want to give a few specific tips regarding the IELTS exam and how to prepare lessons for the IELTS exam. So first of all, the biggest area that I often hear questions about is the writing section. And I think that instructors as well somewhat dread the writing section. As we know from the IELTS exam, there are the speaking, reading, listening, and writing sections. And for the listening section, the reading section, the answers are already checked and charted by the test. There's an answer key. However, the speaking and writing section, it's a bit more subjective. As an educator, we need to be able to assess accurately students' progress in terms of their writing and speaking skills, and also be able to teach them skills to perform well in front of a different evaluator to ourselves on the day of the exam. So as I mentioned earlier, the first step that we can consider is really knowing each writing task and every possible variety of the writing tasks inside out. Know what they might have to deal with in the task 2 writing section. Will they have to write a cause-effect essay? Will they have to do a to what extent essay? Will it be an agree or disagree essay? And for each of those, the body paragraphs are structured differently. And so understanding those sections and helping students understand all the varieties they might encounter for the writing section is a great starting point. Another tip, which is overlooked but very important, is practice those sections by yourself. if you want to really understand the mechanics of writing those sections, the more you practice by yourself with every possible variety of the writing section, the better you'll understand A, what skills students need, and B, what it feels like for students to be in that pressurized situation, taking the test. A very important skill that students often overlook, always overlook, and don't want to do, but it's important as instructors that we teach them, is to brainstorm before taking writing tasks and to proofread their work after completing writing tasks. If students take just 2 to 3 minutes to brainstorm and outline their ideas for the writing tasks, that will help them to spend the rest of their writing section focusing on writing as clearly as they can, rather than spending the rest of their writing section considering what to write. Also, that will prevent them from having one very insignificant and short body paragraph and one very long and kind of convoluted body paragraph. So that few minutes spent is something I do when I take formal English exams, but I also recommend to all of my students, spend a few minutes before beginning the writing section to brainstorm and outline your ideas before starting. Another strategy related to that is time management during the writing tasks. Students should never spend more than a specified amount of time on each paragraph for the writing section. If students are spending too much time, they need to encourage themselves to move on. So familiarity with the time limits and familiarity with how it feels to be going through those time limits is important for students as well too. In terms of proofreading, I always tell students to save at least 2 minutes at the end of the writing task to proofread their work. Even native speakers constantly make mistakes in their writing, and it's so easy to catch those mistakes if we take a few minutes to review each paragraph that we write. In my case, I often check paragraph after paragraph, but it's also an advisable strategy for students to check their full essay after completion of their writing before submitting. Always need to check before submitting. Another skill that we might consider to teach students while they're dealing with the writing section is essay formatting. A student might be a very proficient writer and have a very strong understanding of academic language, but not be familiar with indentation and paragraphing and punctuation in English. So helping students to understand how to structure their ideas, not just write grammatically correct and with advanced vocabulary, but also to organize and structure their writing sections is really important too. And one practical tip from my own experience is I think you really have to encourage students not just to learn new vocabulary, but to apply new vocabulary in their writing. Encourage students to try new words, to practice utilizing new words and grammatical patterns that are covered in class in their speaking answers and their writing answers, because that is what they're being assessed on by proctors of the exam. They're looking for specific grammatical patterns to be used to tick a checkbox. And so if students can apply that, not only will it enhance their writing, but it will also help them to perform better on the test. Which brings me to my next strategic tip, and hopefully it's relatively clear. Perhaps I should have used a black font here. But vocabulary. Considering the vocabulary that students will need to use for the test. And as I said before, this is an area where I think we can always supplement textbooks to improve student performance on the exam. That's one thing that I have added to IELTS classes I've taught, is additional vocabulary textbooks. So as Mr. Nghia will also talk about in his speech, he will introduce you the importance of subjects for the IELTS test and students being familiar with various types of topics which are common on the IELTS exam. So because of that, we can teach lexical sets, groups of vocabulary which are useful to describe various topics. So going through subject-based vocabulary is very important. Furthermore, of course, as we know, transition words are useful not only in academic English, but also on the IELTS exam. So teaching students various transitional words to use throughout the writing is a very important step as well. Other things we might consider are academic adverbs and adjectives, such as rapidly, that students can use to describe charts and to enhance their writing. So we should be considering all the language they need, not only for English as a general subject, but specifically to accomplish the tasks required on the IELTS exam. One more thing students may be less familiar with, which is generally discouraged out in, say, an academic English class after they accomplish the IELTS class, but is encouraged on the exam, would be idiomatic expressions. Using phrasal verbs, using idiomatic expressions, using everyday English in association with academic English can also be helpful for students on the exam. So consider ways to teach phrasal verbs or idiomatic expressions in the IELTS-oriented class. And as I mentioned earlier, make sure students practice, right? Practice makes perfect. It's not enough to have one exposure to vocabulary, but frequent exposure and revisitation of the vocabulary will help them to improve their ability to use those words. And again, that's where formative assessment really plays an important role. Tracking students' comprehension and not only understanding of the word's meaning, but ability to apply it is where formative assessment can be very helpful for us. And finally, I'd like to share some useful tools that I use when preparing for IELTS classes. As all of you have likely experienced in the class, there are very different challenges that are associated with teaching online versus offline classes. And if you have an IELTS class online, I know in some respects it's more challenging to deal with an IELTS class online. You can't walk up to a student's desk. You have 48 people maybe gathered in a room, and suddenly they're only a small square on Zoom or Google Meets. So there's various tools that I use to help me in that capacity, but also offline as well too. The first resource I want to recommend is this website here, IELTS Online Tests. This is not the only website that has practice tests for online IELTS practice, but it's a quite good website to use because this website has a fairly large database of practice IELTS examinations, and it also provides grades for the students for the reading and listening sections. It also has a timer on the screen that students can use. So it fairly closely mimics the experience of the IELTS exam as a free practice in addition to the practice activities that are in your textbook. And for many textbooks, additional practice IELTS exams are necessary for students. Furthermore, a strategy that I borrowed from another teacher who's present with us today, Mr. Enzo, is using the wheel of names. So if you have a large class with a large group of students, I always encourage pair work throughout the class. Having students practice speaking assessments in groups or evaluating their peers as they go through the lesson is great. But when you need someone to demonstrate and perform in front of the class, Wheel of Names is a great tool. You can use this to randomly select a student to present for the class as an example assessment in the group. Another tool I use to check for student comprehension is pollmaker.com or Google Forms to give students a quick survey to check for their understanding of general concepts and know where we need to go back and spend more time. Another, and I would say probably the most useful tool that I'm recommending here is online timers. One thing that's very important is familiarizing yourself with the time limits and time constraints of the exam. And it really helps for students to get comfortable with the clock. In particular, if we think about the speaking section, where students need to speak for several minutes on their own without interruption, it's really important that students get used to that amount of time and what it feels like to speak within those time constraints. And of course, we want to maximize or get close to the length of time that we've been asked to speak for. We don't want to speak for too little or too long because the timer will beep and our answer will be cut off. So having students practice with online timers is a really practical way for them to get used to the time constraints of the text. And finally, I want to recommend one IELTS vocabulary book that I think is quite useful amongst the many that there are out there, which is Check Your English Vocabulary for IELTS, which is divided into subjects. So if you want to focus on the environment or you want to focus on description of various objects or textures, there are segments throughout the book to use in your class. So I often use this to supplement IELTS lessons in a textbook when I find a specific subject where I have a lexical set I need to introduce to the students. So overall, to summarize kind of some of the points that I've introduced throughout my speech, as Adam has mentioned already, and as I've discussed, there is a bright future for those of you who are now leaving at this graduation point to enter the field of academic English and IELTS instruction. There are so many opportunities from English language centers to a university setting, and making sure that you're prepared for the challenge is very important. I think the first step to doing so is really familiarizing yourself with the content that you will need to cover in the class and practicing as much as you can on your own. I think it's very important to organize your materials with lesson plans effectively so that you know each point throughout the lesson and you sequence as well as possible to provide support for students to learn and additional practice and a formative assessment and summative assessment to track progress. And using whatever materials you can that are available to enhance and supplement the textbook or materials you use to support student learning is also a really great step to consider as well. So in closing, I'd like to say to all of you here is, I see quite a few questions. And Mr. Huy, before I move on, I think questions that were added to the chat we should address after in the Q&A section. Is it right? Yes. Okay. So all of your questions will be answered if you share them in the chat. We'll address them after in our Q&A session. So please continue to add them, and we'll go through some of those questions after. But I hope that all of you have a bright and prosperous future in the field of teaching. It's a decision I've never regretted since 2011. And I think that through practice and dedication, you will continually grow as an instructor. So I wish you all the best. And in closing, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, who has a background in master's in English language or linguistics. And he also is working currently as a language educator in a university context and in a private education context as well. So he has a wealth of experience to share with you. And I think what he will be sharing today will really give some specifics to support what we've covered already. So I'd like us to give a warm welcome to Mr. Nghia coming up next. All right, thank you.
Yeah, okay, so thank you so much, Mr. Ryan, and God, it is my turn now. All right, so at first, well, I would like to thank you so much for the dedication of Mr. Ryan, who have gave us a really wonderful presentation, and I hope that you can have your hands-on experience to take in during your IELTS teaching career. And also, at first, I would like to express my special thanks to Mr. Huy Pham, who is the academic director of Horizon TESOL, who has given me a chance to come here today as a presenter. And excuse me, Mr. Ryan, and can you turn off the sharing so that I can show mine?
Yes, absolutely. My apologies.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so let me check the presentation slide. Okay, gentlemen, can you see that I'm sharing the screen for my presentation slides? Can you see it?
Yes, we do.
All right, thank you. Right, so well, so the topic that I am giving today is the approaches for a variety of learners' proficiency in the IELTS, because I believe that during years of experience, we cannot just like conduct the same teaching strategies and lessons and material for different kinds of learners' proficiency. So that's why I'm here today to bring with you my hands-on experience. And I would like to before my presentation, I would like to have a brief introduction about myself, my academic journey, and what I have been doing to make it clear that what I am giving here today is exactly what I have done with my IELTS classes during like more than 4 years. So yeah, this is a brief introduction about me. So at first, I started my academic journey from Saigon University in Vietnam, and my major there was bachelor degree in education. And after my university graduation, I took the master degree in applied linguistics from Curtin University, Australia, and also I have spent several times to take the teaching knowledge test from University of Education in Ho Chi Minh City. And as for what I'm currently doing right now, I am an academic supervisor and IELTS mentor for WESET English Center. I started teaching at WESET like in the summer of the year 2018, so it's probably about 4 years now. And as for my daytime job, I am working as a lecturer of English for Tôn Đức Thắng University. Well, a year ago when I finished my master degree, I took the IELTS test for the third time, and fortunately, I did put a lot of effort on the test, and I got band 8 in the IELTS in May 2021. And also, just like a month ago, I was invited to work at a TESOL trainer for Horizon TESOL. It's such a great honor. And also, with regard to my description on English language teaching experience, I started teaching different kinds and levels of learners, ranging from like young learners, high schoolers, and also adults, university students. So back then, when I was working as a ESL teacher for an international school, I get the learners, my students, probably in the elementary ages, that to practice and prepare for the Cambridge Young Learners Assessment, which are some of you are quite familiar to it, right? It's like starters, mover, and flyers, and I tries my hand on develop syllabus and teach the Cambridge curriculum also in the international school. And since the day when I work at WESET English Center, it was just a small startup company. So then basically I had to, alongside with conducting IELTS classes, I have to also supervise the classes and compile the materials for other teachers and partners, and also build up the syllabus. And also I supervise, I make sure that all the classes at WESET English are on the right track. So I supervise all the classes, and I work with the partners. And also, a year ago, I published my first paper on task-based language teaching in a British journal. Yeah, and and you already know that I conduct TESOL training session for Horizon. And as for the presentation of Mr. Gabriel, what we have already known is that academic English has a lot to do with IELTS preparation, because it is important for, the thing is that it is very important for us, the IELTS instructors, to get to know our student, to get to know what are the components of academic English. Why we have to do it? Because we have to plan lesson plans, and we have to we need to have a proper teaching strategies and assessment for the students. But I wonder a question, that is it the one style fit all over there? Is it one style fit all over there? It's like this one technique that suits all the learners regardless of their level, regardless of their proficiency, right? Do you think that we can teach the same the way that we conduct the band 4 and 5 class, and then for band 5 and 6 class? Do we think that we should do all the same? We don't have to modify any materials. We just conduct the teaching and the assessment the same way? The answer is probably clear, right? No, because different levels of students need different components, linguistic aspects, for example, that we need to build up and help them to scaffold, to claim to the next level. Yeah. So the next thing I want to share is like the outline for the presentation. At first, I will draw you to the importance of students' proficiency. I believe that as ELT educators, all of you are familiar with the CEFR framework. That is I will have a demonstration on this later. And also, I will pick the 3 most popular courses from like each private classes, each IELTS centers that they usually conduct. So like what to remember, what the fundamentals for band 4 and 5 courses, and for band 5 and 6, and also for advanced course, which is 6.5 or above. And for each section, I will have a hands-on lessons on what you need to pay attention to student profile. And also I will suggest some contents and topics that you might want to cover, and then what exactly is the part of the IELTS test to be covered for each level. Because you know that, because like if you took the IELTS before, I think most of you did take it. So like for a student in band 4 and 5 course, do we use reading passage 3 and listening section 4 in band 4 and 5 class? What do you think? Okay, have a comment down below, please. Have a comment down below. Yeah. When we conduct the band 4 and 5 course, do we use reading passage 3 and listening section 4 as the materials for the students? And if yes, then why? And no, then why? Okay. Right. So please tell me the reason. What do you think? Why do you think that we shouldn't use, you know, listening part 4 for band 4 and 5 course? Yeah, the reason. What makes you think so? Okay, type your opinion down below, and then we can address this during the Q&A section. All right, I have received several answers and responses. Thank you so much for your participation. Okay, so you see you see the slides, okay? Because I switched back to it. All right, so yeah, because most of us see eye to eye on the point that we need to have different approaches for different IELTS levels. Yeah, and here comes with me the first part, that is learners' characteristics. Because you have to understand the students what their current level are as soon as possible. I started teaching IELTS in the year 2017, and I'm quite certain that the learners are different enormously based on the criteria that we can think of. So I have this question. This is related to TESOL expertise a little bit. So based on what criteria we can divide our learners' characteristics? We can divide our learners by what criteria? So what make them different in the class? For example, I am expecting your responses in the chat box, gentlemen. Please comment your answer in the box chat. How can we know that your students are different? How can we assess their characteristics? So the thing is, based on the ELT expertise, they are like the 4 most popular way to divide the learners' characteristics. Well, we can divide them by age groups, like young learners, teenage learners, adult learners, young adults, or adult learners, and by their learning style. They learn through visuals, or through listening, or through movements and actions. And also for by personalities. And the most important set of characteristic that I want to address today is we divide the learner's characteristic by level. The thing is that based on my own experience, when I conduct a course, like the ages of the student may vary. It's like, for example, I usually have the band 5 and 6 course, the course of IELTS for students from band 5, band 6, and they are high schoolers there. They are university students there, and there are also workers and adults there. Yeah. So and then their styles of learning are also different. But this one thing that I can be sure is all the same. Mostly the same is the level of the learners in that class, so that in order to go into the band 4, band 5 and 6 class, at least their IELTS proficiency have to be assumed that they are the minimum of band 5. So this one, wow, you are familiar with this? Are you familiar with this one? Are you familiar with this one? Well, And actually, that is the CEFR framework, or we may refer it as the European framework for languages. And there are 6 levels ranging from A1 to C2. I will have to go briefly in this one because I think most of you already know what it is about. So that is the scale to assess the student level from the most basic, which is A1, to the most advanced, the most proficient, which is C2. And well, this one has a lot to do with the IELTS band score, because there's a assumption that the student who are in a certain level in CFR may gain a certain band score in the IELTS. So I invite you to look at the table here. So that depends on the assessment, the means of assessment, the kind of test that we can clarify which CFR level that your learners are in. For example, if the course is from band 4 to band 5, that is the B1 level. So if you are in charge of the class from band 4 to band 5, then the students are probably B1. And the same for B2, that is from 5 to 6 or to 6.5. And this is a real transformation here from 6.5 to 7, because at 6.5, if your student gets 6.5, they are probably at the end of the B2 level, and to gain, and they will come to C1, they will get to C1 if they achieve at least band 7. And from band 7 to 8 is C1 proficiency. And for those who are excellent enough to get 8.5 or 9, that is like the proficient level. That is C2, expert users. Yeah. This one will have a lot to do with the way you conduct the lesson and choose the topics and the materials. Yeah. So I will briefly give a description. You can see the detailed descriptions on the internet. It is vastly available. I would just like pick up the 3 levels to demonstrate for you. The first is a B1, a B2, and C1. And let's see what to what extent that they are different. So that to what extent your students are different if they are from B1, B2, and C1. Yes. Sorry, gentlemen, are you still with me? Hello? Are you still with me?
Yes.
Can you react?
Yes.
Hello, Mr. Huy. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah. And well. And well, let's start with B1 proficiency level. Okay. So what can the students in the B1 intermediate can do? Well, based on the Cambridge CFR description, they can understand the main topic, the main point of familiar topics. Well, so how can we differentiate between familiar topics and unfamiliar topics? Okay, my question for you, have your answer in the chat box down below. How can we differentiate familiar topics and unfamiliar topics when we choose material for our students? So which one should be a familiar topic, and which one should be unfamiliar topic? And how can we assess that? How familiar the topic can be for the students? Is it the thing that they see they engage in their daily life? Is it the thing that they engage in every? Yeah. Very nice, Miss Lin. Thank you. This familiar means that it based on the familiar topics in everyday situations. It's like daily conversation, school, because the student go to school every day, right? So school should be a familiar topic. Well, they eat and drink every day. We do need it, right? So that is a familiar topic because they engage it on a daily basis. Yes. Thank you so much. And also we have to, and also Mr. Timothy Chun. Also, I agree with you that we we should pay close attention to the age of the student, because like the familiar topics for different age groups may have a certain level of difference. Yeah. And back to my point. The B1 intermediate level is the student understand the familiar topics, like here, as you can say, school, work, or leisure, and they can produce simple text, both written text and spoken text on topics that are familiar to them or of their personal interest. If they like about them, then they may investigate and produce like a short text when they speak or when they write something. And also they describe experience and events, and the most important thing is they can give reasons, just a short reason and explanation for their opinions. What I mean is that when they talk about their reference, what they like about something, they can give the reason, but the reason, their reasoning may be very short and in simple language. Yeah, because the students in the B1 level may not have the ability and the language strong enough to express further details in their opinion. So that is the difference. So how about B2? For B2, most probably for the student from band 5 to band 6 in the IELTS, that is upper intermediate, well, they are better in terms of, the thing is they understand the main ideas on the text of both concrete and abstract topics. Well, remember that for B1, things just stop at familiar topics, but the students gain a further step in B2, upper intermediate, because they can also have the ability to understand abstract topics. Yeah, and then they can interact with fluency and make interactive. For what this thing means is that if your students are from band 5 to band 6, then we can expect them to have a good conversation with native speakers. Well, because their language, their linguistic competency is available for them to engage and maintain a conversation with the native speakers. And also they can, instead of just produce simple and short text, now they can give clear and detailed text on a wide range of different topics and subjects, and explain a viewpoint on the topic. So they have the ability to properly develop their ideas, develop their reasoning in the second language. Yeah, so that is the upper. And well, this one for advanced level, and probably the student who finished the higher class, which is often known as the advanced class in the majority of centers out there, want to aim. So they want to aim, like they took the, sorry, when they take the advanced course, they want to get 6.5 or maybe 7 in the IELTS. That is the C1 advanced. So what we can expect from advanced level students, is that they can express the ideas fluently without much effort to find language. They don't have, they can deliver language, speaking, writing language as fluently as native speakers without hesitation and without effort to think what they have to say. Yeah. So also they can be able to use language for different purposes, for like social, for daily purpose, for academic and professional purpose. And also the text they deliver is at length and also well structured and detailed on a range of subjects. Yeah, so I just go through student characteristics on the 3 level, B1, B2, and C1. Yeah, you think that if any one of you who are in charge of the classes, you think that do you think that, do you agree with me that the description given over there is the same, is applicable for your students? Is that if you are in charge of band 4 and 5, that is the description is the same? Well, okay, so, and the next part is, and before I come to the second section, that is the key that you should to bring home. what you need to know is that your students' proficiency varies enormously. So we cannot just expect that they come to the class and then they will have the same level. And then at some point during our teaching career, we may experience a class with different levels of proficiency. So yeah, we do need a proper strategy to handle this situation. And there are three things that are vital to conduct a course. Yeah, that is suitable curriculum. What we need to put during the course. What are the content, topics, and linguistic components that should be involved in our course, and how long your course should be, the course duration. Probably for English classes and centers, for each band, like there's like the course of about like from 60 to 70 or 75 hours, like based on their marketing strategies. It's like you want to get band 4 to band 5, okay, so get to our center and take the course of like 75 hours, yeah, for example. So the course duration should also be taken into consideration, and the teaching practice, the areas of the IELTS test that you may want to cover. Yeah. Okay, everyone. Yes, thank you. And for the first level, that is from band 4 to 5 that I am deliver right now, I will have the keynotes on the fundamentals to conduct a band 4 and 5 courses. But to this point, I know that some of you may have a question, and if you do have a question, please raise it. I think that some of you may ask me that why there's no like IELTS courses for students below band 4. Why don't I just present the strategy for band 0 to band 4 courses? Why do I start band 4 to band 5? So what I mean is that, well, the students below band 4 cannot take the IELTS. They shouldn't learn IELTS or what? So why there are no like band 0 to 4 IELTS here? What do you think? Please raise your voice. Why there's no band below band 4 IELTS courses? Guys. Hello?
If I could jump in, baby, perhaps to answer your question then. To answer that question, yeah, I think that the key reason is when you're working with students who are below the proficiency level to achieve a band 4 score, their ability to write a complex piece of writing using complex grammatical structures or academic language is really limited, right? So at that point, it might be advisable, instead of focusing on, with an IELTS course, we focus so heavily on test taking strategies and structures for the test. And I think that when they're below that proficiency level, it's probably better for them to start with a general English course to develop their knowledge of grammar and their pronunciation skills and just their general English skills before entering into an IELTS course, because the strategies might be applied for an IELTS class. However, even if you know the test structure and strategies inside out, it could be a recipe for disappointment for students to take an expensive exam, an expensive course for a long period of time and not be able to achieve the target band that they need for whatever purpose they're taking the IELTS exam for.
Yeah, I believe that we really see eye to eye to each other, and I have the viewpoint. I totally agree with Mr. Gabriel, because at first it is too challenging, right? Yeah, if we go back to the slides, am I back to the slide yet, gentlemen? Yes. Okay. So here, why there's no section to cover band 4 or 5 course? Okay. The thing is that for students from A1 to A2, the IELTS may not be the best mean of assessment. What I mean is that I want to show you again on this one. Okay, as you see, the IELTS, I believe that, yeah, well, it's not just my belief. It's just the mindset for the ones who design the IELTS test. The thing is that the IELTS can work the best to assess the differences in students' proficiency from band 4 to band 9. So from B1, B2, and C1, C2 level. And actually, when we apply the IELTS test for A1 and A2, we can we cannot like differentiate which one is A1 and A2 when we let them do the IELTS test, because for lower than B1, the IELTS cannot really clarify and differentiate the difference, differentiate the levels of our student. So at least the IELTS can be useful for students at least from band 4. Yes, as you see, because you see that there's no information. There's no information for A1, A2, right? Yeah, because based on the proficiency description on the IELTS, I think like for band from band 3 to 5, if you may check it if you want to. It's like for band 3.5, that is limited user. That's it. That's all we got. We have no further description below band 4. Yeah, as you see this the diagram over here. And back to the section. So yeah, so I have an agreement. I see eye to eye with Mr. Ryan that the students before they take the IELTS, they need to equip themselves with sufficient lexical resources, grammar, and other linguistic components such as pronunciation. Yeah. So the students should really have the certain level of English, which is about band 4, before thinking about getting in IELTS courses and take the authentic test. Yes. And for students who band 4 to 5, what do we need to know about their characteristics? It is in accordance with B1 level, right? As I had mentioned before, they understand the main point of familiar topics. They produce short written and spoken tests and give basic explanation or reasonings. So the thing is that when we design materials, should make sure that the topics and the content are familiar enough to the students. And based on years of experience and testing, assessment, and curriculum design with my partners and WESET, I am willing to recommend to you the 10 most popular topics for band 4 and band 5 level. So you may consider that this is really a hands-on experience for you. That is exactly what you should take home when you design material. And this one, gentlemen, it is the advisable content, the topics that you may want to cover for your student in band 4 and 5 courses. You can help them learn about personal life, traveling, entertainment and sports, food and drinks, consumerism, relationship, places, animal, movie and the media, and career and job. Because are they familiar? Are they the topic that they engage in their daily life? Is it? Is it familiar enough? Are they familiar enough?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So remember, do not make the same mistake that I had made during my earlier career of teaching IELTS. I have to share with you. Well, I really regret it. I really regret my inexperience when, like, in the year 2018. In the year 2018, I was in charge of the IELTS for a center in District 10 in Ho Chi Minh City, and well, my assumption back then was that the student can. I didn't pay attention to the CFR level. And I think that, well, I want to help my student to gain the certain band score in the shorter period of time. So what I did is that, well, I took the band 6 material for foundation course, and of course it didn't work. It didn't work. Yeah, I can be sure with you. So the familiarity of the topics and the familiarity of the topics is really vital for your students. Yeah, and also if you have the limited amount of time to convey and design material based on the content, then I also have some recommended material for you to teach at this level. So I have the 5 popular materials here for intermediate course from band 4 to band 5. That is the IELTS Express, the Cambridge Mindset for IELTS 1, the IELTS Foundation, and also not to mention the complete IELTS from band 4 to 5, which is super popular and well known among IELTS instructors and students. And also the Colin, the series of Get Ready for IELTS from Colin. Yeah, the 5 materials that are very practical and you may make use of it for your course. But do not just rely on one material. My suggestion is that you already have the content, right? So do look through the materials for different, do look through the same topic for different materials. For example, the topic leisure and sport may be covered in the mindset and the complete. So do not rely on one course book. We may combine different materials, provided that the content and the topics and the level of proficiency are the same. Yeah, and do not just rely on one material. Yeah, and also that is my practical, my personal experience on which parts of the IELTS test to be covered. I would divide it into 4 different skills. So for intermediate course, I think that for listening, section 3 and 4 should be left over for higher levels. So for listening in band 4 to 5 course, we just pay close attention to listening part 1 and 2. Yeah, so that you may divide it like during your course, you may have your student practice and get ready, get used to section 1 for the first half. And after that, they have midterm assessment, and then the part 2 will be left for the second half of the course. And when you, this is important and useful, when you play the recording for your students to practice during the class, make sure that you play each section twice. Yeah, each section twice. So like you have them practice section 1 on that day, play the recording twice, and then show them the text script, which is vital. This one must be analyzed. I believe that the practice of listening may not be really useful if we leave the text script if we leave it we have to analyze it, like show the student that okay, so which one is your right answer, which one is your wrong answer. Okay, look at the script and analyze it. Okay, what you just listen. Okay, do you see the trap? Yeah, for example, that is the text script, and we must, as IELTS mentors, we must analyze it for our students. Yeah, and excuse me. And the same will be for reading section. So like passage 3 will be left for other courses. Just like now we focus on passage 1, which is the easiest among the 3 passages. So like for the first half of the course, you focus on reading passage 1, and the passage 2 for the second half. But the thing is, remember the things I share about the familiarity of the content. So the topic of the passage must be critically chosen. Please do not engage them with complicated subjects, such as nanotechnology or psychology, because I do remember that in some IELTS tests they cover psychology in section 2, which I believe that may be too challenging for our students. Yeah, and that is for listening. Sorry, that is for listening and reading. And how about for speaking and writing? So the same is for yeah, just get them, just make them get you to the first section. It's like for speaking section 1, have them practice with their peers, and then we assess them later because we need to help them build up natural fluency. Yeah. And for section 2, yeah, instead of forcing them to speak at length for 2 minutes, the note-taking strategy must be taught. You find yourself a way to deliver the technique for the student to have a good note-taking skills. So like how can teach them how they can make notes for the topic, how they can have a proper notes in order to deliver the speech. And it will be no use if they look at the notes and then they just don't know how to deliver the speech, right? And do not stress them out. Do not stress yourself out by forcing them to take note in 1 minute. That is for the authentic test. So the when we have them practice note-taking skills, I think that 5 minutes is applicable for this level. Yeah, have them help your students like practice note-taking skill for each topic for 5 minutes, so that they can have the detailed opinions enough so that they can practice later on. And for writing, yeah, we can just stop at we can just cover basic types. For task 1, we can start with the graph with timeline, the line graph. I think 4 lines, the 4-line line graph will be kind of complicated for them, but so we need to get them familiar with the test first, right? So that's like the line graph with 3 lines are advisable. And also the graph without trends such as bar chart and pie chart. Remember to choose something basic and not too complicated. This is like the bar chart shouldn't have a lot of bars, for example, or else it will make your student experience frustration. And if you are practicing the IELTS, remember that there are five question types of the IELTS, right? Who remember? There are 5 question types, question forms of the IELTS. The writing test 2, questions. There are 5 types. Please have your comment down below. What are the 5 question types of writing test 2 in the IELTS? Do you remember?
The first one is advantages and disadvantages, cross solutions, discuss both views, to what extent you agree or disagree, and 2-part questions. Like it can be
perfect. Yeah, perfect. Mr. Thank you so much for your.
My name's Park, by the way.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Fat. Thank you. You just cover the whole 5 question type of the test. Yeah, we have agree, disagree. We have we have advantage, disadvantage. We have agree, disagree. We have discuss both views. We have problems and solutions, and we have 2-part questions. There are 5 types. So yeah. So the reason why I choose advantage and disadvantage and also problems and solution for this one is that for advantage, disadvantage, there will be an issues of the test, and then they just need to address what they think, what the advantage and disadvantage of the given issue be. What should they be? And also for a things happen, what are the problems? What are the solutions? So that it will be easier for them, because there will not be a lot of argumentative opinion to cover. Yeah, that is for writing. Excuse me. And also for and the next level is for band 5 and 6 course for B2 level. What we know about students is that they are making progress to comprehend complex text. So it is different from B1 level when they just when they engage a simple and familiar topics. For this one, they can also have the ability to comprehend abstract topics. Yeah, and they are working on discussing and developing their viewpoint on different range of topics. So my advice for IELTS mentor for this level is that we should provide them with more academic content. The lesson should the topic should no longer based on should no longer based on daily based topics. It should be more academic. And remember that from band 5 to 6, the student, some parts of the content, especially the abstract topics, should be challenging for them. So you please consider to pre-process some abstract and highly academic content to avoid student facing too much challenge, leading to the decrease in motivation. And I also have the advisable content for you on time management, psychology, technology, food culture and diet, education, business, environment, festival culture. Yeah, you may name it. At the end of this presentation, I'm willing to share with you the slide so that you can have further look. And I also have the recommended materials for you for band 5 and 6. These one can be useful. Like we have the series of Improve Your IELTS Skill from Macmillan. You see the band score for 5 to 6. The official Cambridge Guide to IELTS. These are two major parts. The first one is skill-based practice, and the second one is 8 practice tests. So we focus on the if we cover the band for 5 or 6 class, just like cover them with the skill-based test, because the practice test at the back of the book will be kind of challenging for some students. And also the series of Barron practice exam. I believe that these exams, the practice test in the Barron book is not as difficult as the authentic test, so that it may be suitable for the student who are in a hurry. They want to finish the course and get band 6 in a timely manner. Then this Barron practice exam will play a useful role to them. And also continue with the complete series. So then this one should be for the band 5.5 to 6.5. Yes. And 3 other useful materials is the series of IELTS Advantage, the Mindset for IELTS, and the Cambridge IELTS. This one is legendary for us if you practice the IELTS for you. The Cambridge series is legendary, right? Yeah. Mr. Gabriel, you agree with me? Yeah, every single one of us wants to take the IELTS.
Yes, I totally agree.
Right? Yeah. Okay. So yeah. Yeah, that is the recommended materials and then the content. And also what we need to know about the part to cover, which is more advanced than intermediate course, right? So yeah, do not leave part 1 and part 2 behind. Just like spend the first few weeks to review the student on this one, but they can no longer listen to the audio twice. Just let them for the first half. Yeah, for the first half of the course cover part 1 and 2, but play the audios once for part 1 and for these parts, and leave the part 3 and 4 for the second half of the course. And they just firstly engage these sections, so play each recording twice or maybe for the third time, so that they understand the ideas, and also help them to analyze this transcript. Yeah, I believe that I don't know if you share a viewpoint with me or not, but I think in the IELTS listening, the section 3 is more challenging than section 4. Well, I don't know if you share the same viewpoint with me or not, but then for section 4 we need to fill out the words only. But section 3, there are a lot of trap, right? There are a lot of a lot of you agree with me that section 3 may be more challenging than section 4. Yes, section 3 is the hardest. Thank you, Fat. Yeah, the thing is that how like the reason why section 3 is difficult. Well, it is due to the type of question, multiple choices and matching information. There's a lot of trap, and there's fewer chance for you to choose the correct answer, because we have to analyze, well, which option is the trap, which one is the distraction, and which one is the correct answer. Yeah, we need to analyze and choose what between the trap and the correct answer for a very limited amount of time. Yeah. So that's what makes section 3 listening difficult. Yeah. And also for reading, yeah, because the student have time to focus on passage 1 earlier, so this should be less focus, and then we focus on passage 2 with time practice. Remember time practice. They have exactly 20 minutes to complete each passage, and when you choose material for them to practice, please pay attention to the passage in terms of complexity and question type. Yes. And also for speaking, they already developed their natural fluency in previous course. So in part 1, so this one should be used for warm-up activities, and then they practice. Remember, if the student practice part 2 in B1 course, it takes them like 5 minutes to repair the notes, right? And this one we should like reduce the time for preparation. Just help them to just like give them 2 or 3 minutes to practice note taking before they deliver the speech. Yeah, and part 3 should be covered for the first time. I suggest that we teach part 3 lessons due to a question type based. That is like for example, problem solutions. We help them to develop strategies to answer this type of question, problem and solution, and advantage and disadvantage, for example. Yeah. So based on each type of question that we cover on each lesson, it will be easier for them rather than we just have them like you know free set of questions. It will be hard for them. Yeah. And also for writing, they can start practice and learn how to engage like graph with 4 lines and also table and other type of part 1 like pie chart, table, map, and diagram. And for writing test 2, we cover the reason why agree, disagree, and discuss both view are here is that they have, remember, here the student can discuss and explain viewpoint. They comprehend abstract topics. So so if they can discuss and explain their viewpoint, then they can have the ability to develop their argumentative opinion. So that's why help them practice agree or disagree. To what extent do they agree or disagree about the given issues in the question? And also, discuss both views is the most challenging, I must say, because there are 2 opposite views in this type of question that they have to deliver. Yeah. And also 2-part questions. That is the content to be covered in Band 5-6 class. And also, well, any question? Thank you for Mr. Wang to hate listening sentence 3. I used to be the same like this before. It was super challenging. It was super challenging. And yeah, and the final part of my presentation, that is the thing to note for band for C1, which is 6.5 plus, or it's like 2 to 7. Okay. Well, the student in advanced level or those who are working towards advanced level can freely use language in flexible manner for different purposes, and they develop well-structured and detailed text. So for those of you who are in charge of 6.5 courses, I think there are 2 things that we should bear in mind. The first thing is like your student, because the majority of your students aim to 6.5 or above after this course. So that is really important to create the authentic environment so that they can get used to the test. So that's why it's useful to practice, to help them practice with timing. They need to like 1 hour for reading, and 1 hour for writing. So do have time practice during the class hour for your student. And also the second thing is CLIL, which is Content Language Integrated Learning, which should be taken into the course syllabus. The reason is that for some abstract topic, such as psychology, it may be too complicated, so that the mentors provide them the basic knowledge via CLIL approach, so that they can have the foundation knowledge before they engage test materials for the abstract topics. There's a lot right here, very abstract and complicated, and also the topic given here is challenging even when we learn in our first language, right? That's a very specific and measure based topic that will pose difficulties for you even when you learn it in your first language. Well, what do we have? We have urban policies, we have architecture, we have business management, psychology and technology, history, healthcare, IT, the universe, and financial matters. It's very challenging for the students. And these topics are covered in the majority of materials that I will recommend it. For test skills, we may use the IELTS test, IELTS Practice Test Plus from Longman. They have three series. There are three coursebooks, 1, 2, 3, and each of which contains 6 practice tests, if my memory serves me right. And also, well, I will need 3 more minutes to wrap up my presentation. And the IELTS Trainer, the official guide, and the last coursebook of the complete series. And also for my set 3 and the Cambridge series. So for listening and reading in advanced course, remember CLIL and full test practice with timing and authentic environment. So we select highly advanced material for a student. And for speaking, part 2 and 3 should be the main focus. And we regularly conduct mock tests between peers and with the teacher, and also help them practice part 3 with less control practice, so that they can naturally enhance their fluency. And also part 3, in order to do well in part 3, they need the ability to improvise language. So have them free practice, less control practice on the questions. And also the rest of the writing types should be covered. It's like the charts of the same type. It's like two line graphs or 2 pie charts. And also discuss both views, for example, with time practice. And finally, I may wrap up my presentation with 3 things to remember. The first thing is the material selection. The content and area of the test to be covered must strictly be in accordance with the CFR framework, or else it won't be very useful for the student. Yeah, and we need a certain level, the appropriate level of scaffolding to help them maximize the learning productivity. Yeah, choose the suitable materials. And also do not rely on one material, one coursebook, but please choose the content from different materials. Yeah, provided that the content and the level of CF are the same. And thank you so much, everyone, for being patient for my presentation. And I will leave this one, the next one, for Q&A section, so that for Mr. Gabriel, me, and Mr. Adam will have the answer for all of your questions. Yeah. So now I will stop sharing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Speakers. Adams, thank you for providing the insights of the education in the global market, the trends in the educations, and how IELTS training or in specific and education industry can fit in this big picture. Thank you, Mr. Grabiel Ryan, for the very engaging sharing for academic English with academic English, and how this aspect of language can fit in the IELTS training. And also thank you a lot, Mr. Vu, for your very details and also the rough presentation So now we can have the better understanding and insight in provide IELTS trainings. So it is your time now to have any questions for our speakers. And let's feel free to pop up any questions in the chat box, or you can turn on your microphone and share directly with us. So if you want to ask something, you can use the reaction raising hand function, or you can turn on your microphone and share with us. So we are.
My apologies, Mr. Huy. I think previously there was one question I noted in the chat that I wanted to answer from a bit earlier. And maybe Mr. Nghia Vu will also have some thoughts about this. So one teacher asked a very practical question, which is, you know, we're talking about the differentiation of these different bands and score zones, but what do we do in the case when we have a mixed level class, when we have a class where we have students who are at different levels of aptitude in one group? And I think that for a lot of us, that's a very common issue to have mixed level classes. For example, when I taught TOEFL in Korea, I would have students out of 120 points who could only achieve a 60, but I would also have students who could achieve 100 on the test. So that presents unique challenges. And I think that a few of the strategies that each of us have mentioned would be beneficial to consider with mixed level groups. So first, I think that's where metacognitive strategies are very important. Students need to have a very clear understanding of their own level within that class to set personal goals for their learning. I think that's the first step. The second step I'd recommend is shoot for the middle. If you have a varied class where you have various levels, 7.5, 4.5 range, or something like that, I would say shoot for the general audience. So go for the majority of students and try to supplement the lessons or give additional materials to advanced learners and try to give additional attention to students who are struggling in their area. And then third, I want to recommend as a strategy using a jigsaw class strategy. You know, pair stronger students with weaker students for some activities. Before they do individual writing, they might work as a group to develop a writing task, right? Where they can see what another student's ideas are. So I recommend strategically working with those mixed level students by putting them into groups. And just to address one more question that I saw in the chat, one person specifically mentioned struggles with speaking and writing classes. And I think we got a lot of great suggestions today from Mr. Nghia Vu. But to talk about it, just a few quick tips. If you have a speaking-oriented section of your class, the first thing I would say is definitely utilize timers. Definitely try to make the practice as authentic and close to real as possible as they go up through their levels of proficiency. And also, it's a good strategy to use pairs, to have students practicing in pairs for an audience. And lastly, regarding writing, I think that for teachers, again, familiarizing yourself with the sections of the test, knowing how they're graded and assessed, and when you check students' writing, when you look at students' writing samples, making sure that while you look at students' writing samples, you pick specific points to give feedback on. So look for things that were taught in class when you're grading writing assignments, and track the progress by meeting those standards, right? I think it's a very difficult task to grade an IELTS writing sample in its entirety in one session, right? We can give a general sense of what the score is, but I think that it's a good strategy to focus on specific issues, to look for common issues and trends in their writing. And then if those are prevalent amongst a larger group of the class, use those as teachable points later for the whole class after. So those are just two questions I saw that I wanted to quickly answer.
I really appreciate your answer for those questions, and I hope that the recommendation and ideas from Mr. Grabiel Ryan can help you with some more insights about this. Okay, so is there any other questions that we can expect from the participants? Feel free.
I have a question that can the IELTS experts, like you guys, can share your experience on about teaching pronunciation to the students? Like there are in my situation, I have given them lots of input about the knowledge of pronunciation, but it seems like the students can't acquire the basics, the foundations of pronunciation during their speaking. So I really want to know your experience about this problem. Thank you.
I'd be happy to share some insights, and then maybe Mr. Adam or Mr. Nghia Vu also have some thoughts. I also find that's a challenging area as well too, right? When we teach pronunciation, it's something that students can observe, but it's so much harder to track their ability to use it than, say, a writing strategy. And I do find a similar issue that you have, where students will learn a pronunciation strategy, but struggle to apply it. So I think the first step is helping students understand their position of their mouth while sounding out each noise, so that they can clearly get used to the motor functions, right, of making that noise, making that sound for pronunciation. The second thing is, I always start when I'm teaching pronunciation with teaching the International Phonetic Alphabet. So I teach the IPA chart, and I always advise students to use oxfordlearnersdictionary.com when struggling with a difficult word, because on oxfordlearnersdictionary.com, they can see where it's spelled out phonetically for North American pronunciation and British pronunciation as well, too, depending on their target. So if they know the phonetic alphabet well, and they understand how to use that resource, the Oxford Learners Dictionary, at the basic level, they can always review and find solutions for challenges with pronunciation. Aside from that, I think I try to condense key pronunciation points into PowerPoint, like specific rules for ED or specific rules for S pronunciation or word stress rules. So I try to make it into a specific set, and I always review. I always go back and repetitiously review. If we go over a point in class 1, I'll give a brief period and maybe go over it again in class 4. And I think by kind of reminding students about these rules and teaching them some strategies, and also teaching them how to position their mouth while using these strategies, I think it can help them to be more aware of their pronunciation when they're speaking. Although it's a very difficult process to fix, I think through practice and repetition, they can eventually get better. But maybe our other speakers have some additional thoughts.
Okay,
Yeah,
so I hope that, yeah, Adam, okay, please continue.
I was just going to add to that a little bit in terms of teaching pronunciation. Something that I have always tended to do, even with beginner classes and elementary classes, is to start with the International Phonetic Alphabet and to really kind of focus on getting those pronunciation foundations in place. Even though it is daunting at first, when you first teach it, and also for the students, I think it's a really useful tool, a keystone tool to start with.
Okay, thanks for your feedback and for your suggestion, Adam. Okay, so I know that we have a lot of questions and also concerns to ask our presenter. I hope that we can have more opportunities in the future, and I'm sure that we will. To discuss further, we can meet you at another workshops or maybe further courses to enhance your teaching's IELTS expertise. And I really appreciate once again for all of the presentations from our keynote speakers here today. And one of the very, encouraging thing is that we started with around 100 people, and now we're still at that number. So, okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is a group effort, and we can hardly do this workshop without your participation, without your contribution. So before the break time, I would like all of us to turn on the camera so that we can have a group photos to keep these moments in memories and to celebrate the success of the workshop today's program. So ladies and gentlemen, can you turn on the camera? Okay, so I can see a lot of wonderful faces here today. Okay, can I expect more? Okay, 15, 20, 30, 40, the more the merrier. Well, I can see some of the very familiar faces here, and appreciate all the moments on the time meeting you again. Okay, so I will count from 1 to 3. So let's do some pose together. So 1, 2, 3. Thumbs up, everyone.